me tell you, he tried to come one time before and he got shot down by a case or something. I can't even remember what happened. And God love Lana, she filled the hole with, I think, her daughter. But anyway, so he tried to get here before, and then he sort of got really into this whole video thing and doing the presentation. And I mean, he stepped up too, so he's doing something. So Mr. John Brutkiewicz is going to talk to us about expungements and forfeitures and be our guinea pig, and we really appreciate it.
Okay.
So, without further ado.
Can y'all hear me?
Oh, we can hear you.
You sure? All right. It's certainly my pleasure and to be able to come speak today to the Mobile Legal Professional Association. My secretary, Lana, I've been doing this 32 years, and she's been my secretary paralegal for the last 5 or 6 years. And by far, she's the best secretary, best paralegal I've ever had. And I think she's the best in Alabama. And when she came to talk to me and asked me to do this, I immediately said yes. And I was immediately taken back and thinking about my mother. I don't know whether, I know Babs knows my mother or knew my mother, and some of y'all else might have known her or heard of her or known of her. But she was a legal secretary, paralegal, for over 60 years. She died at age 79 in the preceding Friday, and she fell out on a Monday. The preceding Friday, she had worked, and she was getting up to take one of her great-grandchildren to daycare and then go to work. She worked, she graduated valedictorian of her high school class, came to Tuscaloosa, met my dad. My dad was starting law school, and after a year, they got married. She dropped out of school and started working in a law firm in Tuscaloosa. That's still there. Law firm is still there. LeMater is the name of the law firm. And she helped put my dad through through law school. Once he graduated, she then came to Mobile. My dad was in the service for a couple of years, and had my older brother Skip, and continued to work being a legal secretary for here in Arundel for a couple of years. And then my daddy came back, and she helped found our firm and worked as a legal secretary, paralegal, bookkeeper, office manager, and did everything. By far, the smartest person with the last name Brutkiewicz that I've ever known. Before I came here today, I had often wondered where the word secretary comes from. And I had a feeling because the first 5 letters are secret. And so I looked it up on dictionary.com, and sure enough, the word comes from medieval Latin, and the word is secretarius, which means clerk, notary, or confidant. And in medieval Latin, the definition was a person entrusted with secrets. And that's true. We have people come into our office, and I'm prohibited by ethical considerations from discussing the case with anyone. And Lana sits there and listens to it, and she's got to be secretive also. And it's just, you know, when people get around, they find out that she works for a lawyer, they're going to want to know about the cases. And, you know, she probably tells them a little bit, but she doesn't divulge anybody's names or that. And so she's a carrier of secrets. And when someone calls important to my office, and I'm either out of the office or maybe too busy to talk to them or don't have anything else to tell them, she says he's in a meeting. She keeps that secret that the meeting is on the golf course. I've come to you today to talk about two. This thing's come off. See if you put them.
It just clips, doesn't it?
two important areas of the law that many of you probably don't deal with. I know Allison probably deals with some of this working for Donnie Brisman, but they're two very important areas of the law. And the reason that they are is both of them have to do with criminal law. And back in the olden days, I don't think the same type people got arrested. I think back in the olden days, if you riding down in Spring Hill and you were intoxicated, or you had some marijuana in your car, and your daddy worked for the bank, or he was a lawyer, or he was a doctor, the cop would look at you and say, "I'm gonna call your daddy, go on home." Well, that doesn't happen anymore. And y'all's children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, your friends, your family, everybody's got someone in their family that's gotten in trouble with the law. And today it's very, very serious. The most minor thing with social media and the internet, the most minor thing can come up and harm someone. All you got to do is get on the internet and see somebody's mugshot. And when somebody tries to go get a job, nowadays employers that used to, they didn't know where to look. They couldn't call up the police officer and get him to do an NCIC, so they didn't know where to look, so they'd hire people, and they didn't ask questions. And if they did ask questions, they never follow up. Nowadays, these businesses have access to the internet, and they can see where Johnny Brutkiewicz or anybody else that comes to try to hire on has been arrested. They see their mugshot. And so it becomes important as lawyers that when that person gets ready to get hired, that the lawyer has done his job and investigated the case and worked the case to try to keep that person from having any type of conviction. There are two things bad that can happen when you get convicted. You can have a record and you can go to jail. Well, eventually you're going to get out of jail, but that record is going to stay with you forever. You could be 90 years old and want to go work at Walmart as a greeter, and they see that record and they're not going to hire you. So these two areas that I want to talk to you about, when I talk to you about them, I want you to keep in mind the importance of these things. The first thing I'm going to talk to you about is expungements. Back in the old days, people would call me and say, "Johnny, you handled that case for me beautifully. You got the case dismissed, but everybody that I go work to knows about it." Well, I'd like to help you, but there's no such thing as an expungement statute in this state. Old Judge McRae, they'd go to Judge McRae and he said, "I'd like to do it. Show me some law." Well, there wasn't any. We had a city court judge that was expunging cases, and he had no authority. Well, he ended up getting removed because of that. Judge Lackey, and he was a fine fella and a fine judge, and he thought he was doing the right thing, but there wasn't any law for it. In 2014, the legislature enacted an expungement statute, and although it's not perfect, and Babs will tell you this, she handles a lot of them, it's not perfect, it's a good start. All misdemeanors can be expunged. A misdemeanor is anything that carries a punishment of not less or not more than a year. Stuff like DUIs, shoplifting, domestic violence, public intoxication, simple assault. Simple assault's when two people get mad at one another and swing punches, as opposed to felonious assault where somebody brandishes a gun or a knife or someone is seriously physically injured. And the law is not black and white, it's gray. And so if you get arrested for felonious assault, no matter what, as the law stands now, you're not eligible. Now, how can an offense be expunged, and what offenses can be expunged? Like I said, misdemeanors and non-violent felonies. Well, in order for it to be expunged, there must be a finding of not guilty. I have people call me all the time, "Mr. Brutkiewicz, I'm doing great, I'm doing wonderful, I want this job, I got this case, and I want it expunged." Well, I get on the internet, get on Alicourt, and lo and behold, he didn't hire a good lawyer, or he got an appointed lawyer, and the appointed lawyer never went to see him, never called him, never met with him, never knew the facts, never investigated the case, never talked to the police officer, never talked to the DA, didn't do anything. Pled him guilty. It's over with. Church is out. Until maybe, possibly, the legislature will make this statute better. The offenses, the felony offenses that are not expunged, cannot be expunged, are enumerated. And the list of them is pretty long. As you can imagine, there are things like murder, rape, robbery, and like I said, assault, felonious assault, trafficking in drugs is not expungible. Cannot expunge that. Well, here's my question. You got a guy that gets charged with one of these offenses. It's easy to get somebody arrested. All the police officer has to do is go down and swear out a warrant. Get somebody arrested. Murder, rape, robbery. Guy makes bond. Comes to court, hires a good lawyer. They find out he's working in California. Got the boss man saying he's working in California. Got receipts where he clocked in, clocked out. Perfect alibi. Didn't do it. DA says case dismissed. Guess what? No expungement. Then you got a guy, hires a good lawyer, drunk as Cooter Brown, Sunday morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, runs in the back of somebody, goes down there in the court, good lawyer, does a good job representing him. He's either acquitted, found not guilty, or he talks the DA into giving him what's called good behavior, where he goes and does some DUI school and victim impact, goes to we put on informal meets with a CRO, court referral officer, tests negative for drugs, does everything he's supposed to do, and his case gets dismissed. He comes back later on, he gets his case expunged. The guy over there that was charged with murder, he's out of luck. That's not right. As the law stands, that's what it is right now. As I said, maybe the legislature in the future will make it better. I hope so. The first thing that will happen, you have a client come in and Lionel will meet with them, and the first thing that they got to do is go get fingerprinted again. They got fingerprinted when they got arrested. Well, they got to go back to the police station and get fingerprinted. That costs $5. Next thing they got to do is they got to send a $25 money order, a copy of their driver's license, and an application that they have to fill out. And then in that application, it asks, what you do is you take the they'll send off and get a certified. They'll send off and get your complete record, and then in there you'll have to fill out stuff about what happened with your case. It got dismissed. I was found not guilty, and the such, and that's called an application. And this background check comes back, and it helps you in filling out this application. Once you do that, you send this stuff to the Alabama Legal Enforcement Agency. They look at it, they send it back to you. You get certified copies from the court showing the disposition of the case that you're trying to get expunged. Once you get all that together, you file your petition with the Circuit Court Criminal Division. And at that point, you have to send a notice or a copy of the petition to the arresting party. Normally, that's the police officer in whatever municipality the event occurred. And then you also have to send a copy to the district attorney's office, and then also a copy to the clerk of the court. Now, what has happened in a lot of these cases, there's a $300 filing fee. It's not court costs, it's a filing fee. And the statute says $300, can't be waived, can't be, there's no way around it. Can't pass go until you pay the $300. What ends up happening in a lot of these cases, police officer sees somebody out, causes them problems, not cooperative, drunk, he'll end up arresting them for public intoxication, disobeying a police officer, fighting with the police, anything he can think of, everything he can think of. So we've got cases where people have 6 different cases for one event. 6 times 300 is $1,800. First of all, the people have problems paying their lawyer. Then they got to come up with $1,800. And that's something else that needs to be changed. And y'all know any legislators, I'd appreciate you telling them that. Once that is done, once it is filed, say it ends up in front of Judge Young Peter, Babs will get a hold of it and she will give the district attorney's office, through her boss, 45 days in which to object. When we first started out in these cases, the district attorney's office would object to every single one. I don't know what the reasoning was. There's all kinds of reasons, just to object. The judge will set it down for a hearing, and at that time, I've been very successful. I haven't known of anybody that's had any problems getting these expungements granted. Once they're granted, the court will issue an order, and it will tell everyone, all databases, all records, including Alicourt. Y'all all familiar with Alicourt? Will tell Alicourt, remove these items, remove these records, and they will then remove these records and put them in what they call the Alabama Criminal Justice Center, to be retained indefinitely. Whatever that is, I don't know what the Alabama Criminal Justice Center is. But that's what happens to them. My question is, what happens to that mug shot that my client had when he meets this girl who's in medical school and that likes him very well, and the first thing she's going to do is go on Googling. If she sees that mug shot, she might be okay with it, but her daddy ain't going to be. And when he goes to try to get a job, that's the first thing that's going to come up. I guess if he looks at his boss, soon-to-be boss man, and says, I hired a lawyer, Johnny Brutkiewicz, he got me acquitted, and my case has been expunged. Maybe that'll do it. I don't know, but we'll see. But once you put something on the internet, I've been told and I believe it never goes away. So I think this expungement statute is a good thing, and it's been very beneficial to a number of my clients. But again, it needs tweaking, and I hope that they'll do the things that I've just talked about to make it better. The second thing I'd like to talk to y'all about is forfeitures, civil forfeitures. And do any of y'all ever, or y'all's lawyers ever look on Alicourt to see the cases that are filed each day? A good lawyer will do that. Whether you got a civil case or a criminal case, you representing some insurance company, and you got a plaintiff that sued someone that you're insuring, and you find out by looking on Alicourt, look at here, he's getting divorced. Look at here, he's got somebody suing him on a debt. Maybe the reason why he filed this is because he's looking for money. Of course, you already knew that, but maybe if he's being sued, maybe he'll be more likely to settle for less. Or look at here, he's been arrested for a crime involving moral turpitude, which affects his credibility when he takes the witness stand. Well, anyway, I look on it every day, Lana looks on it every day, and about 20% of all cases filed in circuit court civil are forfeitures. Will you agree with that, Babs?
That's quite a few, yeah.
That and collections. So there are a lot of them. And many people have become upset with this civil forfeiture. I've been reading articles in newspapers, magazines, and such, and there's a growing distrust and a growing dislike for civil forfeitures. Did you know that someone's money can be taken by the police authorities without that person ever being arrested? Did anyone know that? Many times on the highway, these state troopers and DEA agents will stop people, find no drugs, find no criminal behavior whatsoever, and find people in possession of large sums of cash or small sums of cash, and just take it and attempt to, and forfeit it without any judicial hearings, without anything. I read an article in the Washington Post that says the DEA, Drug Enforcement Agency in this country, in the last 10 years has seized $3.2 billion in cash from people not charged with a crime. And these people had absolutely no judicial review of their cases. 10 days ago in the Mobile Press Register, a girl named Jennifer McDonald, and I do not think that this is the lawyer Jennifer McDonald, but it might be, complained that Alabama's forfeiture law, as it exists today, is the worst in the country. It has, she says, no reporting whatsoever, nor any accounting. There's no accounting as to what's been done with the money, how much money is taken, and who's gotten the money and the other fruits of forfeiture. And there is no reporting statewide as to how much money is being taken, what counties are taking what amounts of money, what percentages of the money, or anything. And so I suspect that the time will come when other people like y'all will become more aware of this and be outraged by it, because it is outrageous. In Alabama, the statute allows, it's section 2293, allows for the forfeiture of all controlled substances that are found by the police, which makes sense. I mean, you can't give it back to the person or give it to someone, then they'll be guilty of distributing, and or that person would be guilty of possessing. All monies used or intended to be used to facilitate any violation of any law of this state concerning controlled substances. All vehicles that which are intended for the use to transport or in any manner to facilitate the transportation, sale, receipt, possession, or concealment of any property described in subsections 1 and 2, which are controlled substances. So what we find as lawyers who in this field are police officers arresting people for possessing controlled substances, including marijuana, and once they find them in possession of these controlled substances, taking any and all monies they find on or about the person or the vehicle, and the vehicle itself. That's basically what we see in almost all of these cases. Your question is, or might be, and if it was your son or your daughter or one of your relatives or one of your friends, what's a lawyer to do about it? Well, I tell you one thing that you don't do is you don't sit on it, you don't put your head in the sand, you defend it. I tell people this all the time. If Alabama's scheduled to play Blount High School in Pritchard and Alabama doesn't show up, who wins? Blount. You don't answer this thing within 30 days, the DA is going to go down and see Judge Youngpeter or whatever judge it's in front of, and they're going to get a default judgment. It's going to be over with. Church out. So, as lawyers, what we do that handle these kinds of cases, or the lawyers that handle them properly, there are 5 what I call distinct areas in which you can fight these cases. The first area that you can fight these cases on is whether or not the action was brought within a reasonable time. The statute requires that they be brought within a reasonable time. What's a reasonable time? Feel like I'm in law school. A reasonable time is a reasonable time. The case of, the only case, there's a bunch of cases, but the best case that I've seen is a case called State of Alabama versus $17,636. And that was in 1994. And the Supreme Court said that 7 weeks is too long, 49 days. They must also, that court case said, under the Due Process Clause, they must serve the defendant in a reasonable period of time. And they must serve him properly. In this case, they waited 7 weeks, and when they did file it, they went to try to serve the guy at his last known address. Guess what? The guy was in jail. So that's not reasonable. That's not giving someone due process. And so they ordered that the $17,636 be returned to the defendant by and through his attorney. The second way that we lawyers defend these cases is to require the state of Alabama to prove that the drugs that are found, the controlled substances, were in fact possessed by the defendant. Y'all all hear people say this, and we like to tell our children and our grandchildren this. If you're caught in a car where there's drugs, you're just as guilty as the other guy. Well, we're not being truthful. That's not true. Fortunately, it's not true. In a case in which the drugs are not found on the person's body, the state has to prove that the defendant had knowledge of the presence of the drugs and have what they call dominion and control over the drugs. If there was some drugs in that back there in the back of the courtroom, of this restaurant, I didn't know about it, and I certainly didn't have dominion and control of it. And even if I knew about it, it might belong to the owner of this restaurant. I don't have the right to move it or sell it or do anything with it. It doesn't belong to me. I don't have dominion and control. So that's the second area in which defense lawyers in these cases defend these cases. Another thing I see a lot of is you'll see mama or daddy loaning their car that's registered to them to their children. And lo and behold, the child is caught with controlled substances in their vehicle. Well, you know, police officers are not supposed to be lawyers. They're not supposed to know the law necessarily. They think, hey, I found drugs. I got a car. It's ours. That's not necessarily true. And the bad thing about these civil forfeiture cases, it gives police agencies an incentive to try to forfeit. Because guess where the monies in the vehicles go when they're forfeited? To the DA's office and the police department. You see these police officers that are narcotics officers riding around in these fancy cars, they used to belong to the drug dealers. And a lot of them, and they're my friends, and I have to deal with them every day. And as a matter of fact, they end up representing a lot of them when they have problems. But they also drive these cars around and use them as personal vehicles. So there's an incentive for them to do that. Well, if the car doesn't belong to the person you found in possession of the narcotics, the law gives an exception for an innocent owner defense. And what they've got to prove is that the owner of the vehicle knew or with reasonable diligence could have determined that that particular child was transporting controlled substances. And you know, that's hard to prove, hard to do, to get in someone's mind and determine whether or not they knew or should have known that their child was involved in the drug trade or carrying narcotics. I liken it to in the civil cases where you have someone who gets in a car wreck with someone else's vehicle. You've got to prove that they were either on an errand for that person or that person had negligently entrusted the vehicle to that person, knowing that that person was not a good driver or had a bunch of DUIs or was reckless or had lost his insurance or something of that nature. Or when he loaned it to him, he couldn't stand up because he was so intoxicated. So that's how difficult it is to prove that. In the leading case on this innocent owner's defense is a case out of Dothan, Alabama, called Saliba versus Richard Saliba versus State. And in this case, this kid, young kid, I don't know how young he was, but he was, the son of Richard Saliba, had been in trouble numerous times for drugs, over and over and over and over again. And when they found him this last time, he was passed out behind the wheel with a needle in his arm, shooting up fentanyl, which is the stuff they give cancer patients, those patches they put on cancer patients. And he was driving his daddy's Tahoe. And of course the state thought they had a great case, and they were going to take this $50,000 Tahoe that belonged to Mr. Saliba in Dothan. But they were unable to prove that he knew or should have known. He put on testimony that his son, after the last time he got arrested, had gone to rehab, that he had, since he had gotten back from rehab, he had drug tested him, and he had periodically swept the car to make sure there weren't any drugs in it. And the son had testified that he was hiding his drug addiction from his daddy, that he would carry what they call fake urine with him in case his daddy got ready to drug test him, and that his daddy wasn't aware that he was relapsing. And the circuit judge in Dothan agreed with him and ordered that the property be returned to Richard Saliba. And the Supreme Court of Alabama agreed with him. And their rationale was that he didn't know or should not have known, that he had used reasonable diligence, and he did not know of the intended use of the property so as to have prevented such use. Now, being the lawyer that I am and being suspect of everything, I looked up Mr. Richard Saliba. There are some Salibas in Mobile. They're Lebanese, and they're very, very fine people. And I'm sure they're related to these Salibas. This Mr. Saliba was the head, president, CEO of the largest retail construction company in Dothan. So sometimes it's not exactly who you know. I mean, what you know is who you know. And sometimes, unfortunately, justice is for those who can afford it. So anyway, that's the leading case on innocent owner's defense. Next line of, see if how much time we got, Lana. All right, tell me how much. Look. All right. Couple more things, two more things. With the money situation, there have been plenty of cases where they found a whole bunch of money, and the courts have said, you've got to prove that this money, no matter how much it is, no matter how close the money is to the narcotics, you've got to show a specific transaction involving the sale of drugs tied to this particular money. Civil in nature, and as you can imagine, the courts are real hesitant, or just like in a civil case today, they make you prove a lot in order to get a verdict in a civil case, and this is a civil in nature. So that's another defense that we use. And the last defense, and this is in a situation that I like to refer to my buddy Bob Clark. He says that it's bad when your client's guilty, and it's even worse when they can prove it. The last defense is the Eighth Amendment defense, which is excessive. The Eighth Amendment says no one shall be subject to excessive fines and penalties. And when the person gets punished criminally, and then we have a situation where they're trying to take his vehicle or his money, they look at it and see whether or not it's excessive. In one case, they found a guy with 6 grams of marijuana, which would be, a gram would be about the size of a nickel, and a couple of pills, and they were trying to forfeit a $35,000 vehicle. And the court said that's excessive. And so that'd be your last line of defense. These are, there are a whole lot of these cases. Very few lawyers handle them, but they're important to the clients, and especially someone whose family members are hurt by the Forfeiture Act. Thank you for letting me come talk to y'all. Thanks.